Welcome back and welcome to guide number 4 in our五运六气series. On the screen you can see today's subject, the 6 Qi, and this time we go deep. In the earlier lectures we met the 6 Qi at a high level. Today we open them right up. We'll cover the host Qi and the guest Qi, the two layers of Qi running through every year, the Tiān and Zhǔ, which rule the two halves of the year, the客主加臨, where guests and hosts meet at each step, and finally Shèng, the domination and the revenge mechanism that nature used to correct itself. And as always, I will carry one real year all the way through as our worked example, 2026, the year being Wu. And by the end, we'll have built its complete 6 Qi chart, step by step. Just to place this in the bigger picture, the 5 periods, the Wu'un, come from heaven, and we covered those earlier. The 6 Qi come from the earth. They are the terrestrial world's response to those heavenly periods. Put the two together, and we have the complete energetic character of any year. Let's begin. Before we dive in, here's the roadmap for today in 8 steps. First, the 6 Qi themselves and how they come from the 12 earthly branches. Second, a set of clinical reference cards, the organs each Qi governs and what happens when it is in excess or in deficiency. Third, the host Qi, the Zhǔ Qì, the fixed, unchanging seasonal backdrop of every year. Fourth, the guest Qi, the Ke Qi, the variable layer that changes each year according to the branch. Fifth, the Tiān and the Zhǔ, the two most clinically important positions, which rule the first and the second halves of the year. Sixth, the客主加臨, the analysis of what happens when the guest Qi meet the host Qi at each step. Seventh, Shèng, domination and revenge, nature's self-correcting rebound in deficiency years. And eighth, we pull everything together into the complete 2026 Liù Qì chart. Each step builds on the one before, so let's take them in order. Let's start with the section 1, the 6 Qi and where they come from. The 6 Qis are the 6 atmospheric forces that govern climatic and physiological change across the year, and they operate through 6 periods of roughly 60 days each. Here's the key contrast to hold in mind. Where the 5 period, the Wu'un, originate from heaven, the 6 Qi arise from the earth. They are the energetic response of a terrestrial world to those heavenly periods. Together, heaven and earth, Wu'un and Liù Qì, describe the full character of any year. On the next slide, we'll see exactly which branch produces which Qi. Here's the master table linking the 12 earthly branches to the 6 Qi. Each branch pair always produces the same Qi. It never varies. So once you know this table, you can name any year's governing Qi. Let me read it down. The branches Jī and Wu give Shaoyin imperial fire, a fire Qi, climate heat, governing the heart and small intestine. Chou and Wei gives a tie in them earth, dampness, governing the spleen and stomach. Yin and Shen give Shaoyang, minister fire, the second fire, summer heat, governing the triple burner and the pericardium. Mao and You give Yang Ming dryness, metal, dryness, governing the lung and the large intestine. Chen and Zhǔ give Tiān, cold water, cold, governing the kidney and bladder. And Si and Hai give Jué in wind, wind, governing the liver and gallbladder. For our example year 2026, the branch is Wu, so it's governing Qi, its Si Tiān is Shaoyin in purifier. Notice the color coding running down the Qi column. We'll keep those same color for each element throughout the whole guide. Before we go further, I want to highlight a feature unique to 6 Qi. It contains not one fire but two, telling them apart matters clinically because they behave very differently. On the left is a Shaoyin in purifier, the sovereign fire. It governs the heart and the small intestine. Its nature is clear, directed, warming, and nourishing. Think of the steady warmth of a ruler on the throne. When it's disorders, it tends toward cardiac and emotional conditions, palpitations, insomnia, agitation, heat rising to the upper body. On the right is a Shaoyang minister fire, the ministerial fire. It governs the triple burner and the pericardium. Its nature is transformative, activating, dispersing, more explosive than the emperor's steady glow. When it disorders, it tends toward metabolic and hormonal problems and upper body heat, hot flushes, hyperthyroid patterns, rapid pulse. Keep this distinction in your pocket because in our 2026 chart, the imperial fire and the minister fire will line up together. And when these two fires meet, they amplify into what we call double fire, the most intense heat any year can produce. Section 2 gives you the clinical reference card. Each of the 6 Qi has its own distinctive clinical signature, and what really matters is that each one presents two different ways. There is one picture when the Qi is dominant, when it is the Si Tiān or otherwise in excess, and the opposite picture when the same Qi is deficient or suppressed. Over the next 2 slides, I will walk through all 6. 3 at a time, so you can recognize both faces of each Qi. Here are the first 3 Qi, the ascending, warming half of the cycle. Let me take each card in turn, reading the excess picture and then the deficient picture. First, Jué in wind, governing the liver and the gallbladder. In excess, it brings wind diseases, tremor, dizziness, even convulsion. Together with the liver qi stagnation and uprising, headache, eye disorders, tendon problems, and anger. When deficient, the opposite, liver blood deficiency, cramps and weakness, poor vision, timidity, and qi that can't flow smoothly. Second, Shaoyin in purifier, governing the heart and small intestine, and not the star because it is our 2026 Si Tiān. In excess, inflammation, high fever, mouth and tongue sores, palpitations, insomnia, agitations, even mania. Heat rises to the upper body and the blood becomes restless. When deficient or suppressed, hot yang deficiency, cold limbs, depression, poor circulation, and a kidney heart disharmony, which is exactly what we'll see in 2026 when excess water suppresses the heart. Third, Shaoyang minister fire, governing the triple burner and the pericardium. In excess, heat in the upper body and chest, emotional fire, insomnia, hot flushes, hyperthyroid, and hormonal imbalance, rapid pulses. When deficient, triple bundle dysfunction, metabolic sluggishness, cold extremities with a hot core, and weakened immunity from depleted ministerial fire. Now the second three Qi, the consolidating, cooling half of the year. Again, excess first, then deficiency. First, tying damp earth, governing the spleen and stomach. In excess, dampness and phlegm, edema, heavy limbs, bloating and fullness, loose stools, digestive disorders, and that all over fatigue and heaviness. When deficient, spleen Qi deficiency, poor appetite, muscle wasting, worry and overthinking, and the liver overacting and a weakened spleen. Second, Yang Ming dryness metal, governing the lung and large intestine. And again, note to the star because this is our 2026 Zhai Quan. In excess, respiratory conditions like a dry cough, asthma, and breathlessness, plus a dry skin, constipation, grief, worsening skin, and heat in the large intestine. When deficient, lung insufficiency, chronic dry cough, irregular bowels, withering skin, and an emotional difficulty in letting go. Third, Tiān cold water, governing the kidney and bladder. In excess, cold invading the body. Joint and low back pain, edema when kidney yang fails to transform fluid. Fear and anxiety, and reproductive disorders. When deficient, kidney yang or insufficiency, bone weakness, poor memory and willpower, exhaustion, and a lack of drive. With all 6 Qi now clear in both their faces, we can move to how they are arranged across the year, starting with the fixed host Qi. Section 3, the host Qi. The Zhǔ Qì. This is the fixed layer of the year. The host Qi divides every year into 6 fixed periods of about 60 days each, and crucially, this sequence never changes. It is the permanent seasonal backdrop, the regular flow of the 6 climatic forces through the 4 seasons. Let me show you the 6 steps and their dates, and then how each one maps onto organ activations. Here are the 6 fixed host steps with their dates. Read down the Qi column and you will notice the sequence follows the 5-phase generation cycle. With the fire appearing twice, Imperial Fire and the Minister Fire, step 1 is always Juan Windwood, beginning at Dahan, major cold, around the 20th of January in the Northern Hemisphere, and around the 23rd of July in the Southern. Step 2 is Shaoyin Imperial Fire. Step 3 is Shaoyang Minister Fire. Step 4 is Tai-in Damp Earth. Step 5 is Yang Ming Dryness Metal. And step 6 is the final step, is Tiān cold water. 2 practical notes. The first, because we teach for both hemispheres, the Southern dates are offset by 6 months. So Southern step 1 starts at Dashu in late July. Second, remember this host sequence is the same in every single year. It's the steady backdrop. In the next slide, we'll see what each step means clinically. The host Qi. The host Qi gives us a baseline seasonal health framework, a predictable rhythm of which organ is the most active. When? Let me walk in the year. In step 1, Windwood, the liver activities. This is the season of spring detoxifications. The liver Qi rises, so we support its smooth flow and help patients avoid anger. In step 2, Imperial Fire, the heart energy peaks, a cardiovascular focus, and we protect heart in from the summer heat. In step 3, minister fire, the metabolic fire peaks. The triple burner governs fluid transformations. Digestive fire is its strongest, but it can easily tip into excess. In step 4, damp earth, the spleen governs through the damp of the late summer. Manage diet carefully and watch for edema. In step 5, dryness metal, the lung descends through autumn dryness. Support the respiratory system and the skin, and encourage emotional letting go. And in step 6, cold water, the kidney governs the storage season of the winter. Conserve Jing, prioritize deep rest, and protect against cold. This rhythm is your default expectation for any year. The next layer, the guest Qi, is what bends this baseline into each year's unique shape. Section 4, the guest Qi, the Ke Qi. If the host Qi was the fixed backdrop, the guest Qi is a variable layer painted over it. It changes every year according to the year's earthly branch, and it rotates on a 6-year cycle, laid over the fixed host. The guest Qi is what gives each year its unique energetic character. Let me show you how its sequence is built. Here's how the guest Qi sequence is actually built, and it's more systemic than it first looks. Start with the box on the left. There is one fixed rotation that the guest Qi always follow. Impure fire, then damp earth, then minister fire, then dryness metal, then cold water, then wind earth, and then it loops back to impure fire. That order never changes. What changes each year is where you start. And the rule is this: you take the year's 4 Tiān and you place it as step 3. Then you will fill in the rest by walking that fixed rotation. Going backwards from step 3 to fill steps 2 and 1, and forwards from steps 3 to fill steps 4, 5, and 6. That gives us the 2 positions on the right, which are the most important in the whole system. The third step guest Qi is the 4 Tiān, controlling heaven, which dominate the first half of the year and the upper body. The 6th step guest Qi is the Zhai Quan, at the fountain, which dominate the second half and the lower body. And notice the 4 Tiān and the Zhai Quan always sit exactly opposite each other on the 6th Qi wheel, a complementary polar pair. On the next slide, you will see the full sequence worked out for every branch. This is the full rotation worked out for every branch. The 6 guest steps for each branch year. The Qi are abbreviated to their 2 character names and they kept in the element colors so you can scan it quickly. Look at the top row, the Zhǔ year, which is highlighted because it's our 2026. Reading across, step 1 is cold water, step 2 is wind old, step 3, the 4 Tiān is impure fire, step 4 is the damp earth, step 5 is minister fire, and step 6, the Zhai Quan, is the dryness metal. So impure fire over dryness metal, exactly as we found from the branch. Now notice the structure of the whole table. Each row is simply the row above, shifted along by the 1 position. That's the fixed rotation in action. And every row, whatever it sits in the step 3 4 Tiān column, has its complementary opposite sitting in the step 6 Zhai Quan column. Once you see that shifting pattern, you don't have to memorize the grid. You can regenerate any year's guest sequence from the branch alone. Section 5 zooms in on the two positions we just identified, the Si Tian and the Zhai Quan, because clinically they are the most significant of all. They define the dominant energetic character of the year's first and the second halves. Let me give you their precise definition, their date, and what their relationship with the Daun tell us. Let's define the two positions precisely. The Si Tian, controlling heaven, is the third step of the guest sequence. It governs the first half of the year, roughly from the Da-Han to Da-Shu, which in the northern hemisphere is about the 20th January to the 22nd July. It descends from heaven and set the dominant climate and health tones for the upper body and the first 6 months. The Su Wen says the Qi that controls heaven governs the upper position and oversees the year's Qi. The Zhai Quan at the fountain is the 6th step, always directly opposite the Si Tian. It governs the second half of the year, Da Shu to Da Han, roughly from the 23rd July to 20th January in the north. It rises from the earth and governs the lower body and the second 6 months. Together, Si Tian and the Zhai Quan are complementary pair, the polar balance of heaven and earth energy, and together they form the complete annual template. Now, the clinically crucial part at the bottom, the relationship between the Da-Yun and the Si Tian. There are four. When the Si Tian generates the Da-Yun, that's Shun Hua, harmonious, with moderate climate disease. When the Da-Yun controls the Si Tian, that's Bu He, discord, where the period overpowers heaven. And that is our 2026. When the Si Tian controls the Da-Yun, that's Tian Xing, heavenly punishment, heaven suppressing the period. And when the Da-Yun and the Si Tian are the same element, that's Tian Fu, the heavenly complement, an amplified and clinically significant year. Brings the two layers together.客主加临 literally means the guest and host superimpose. It is the analysis of how the guest qi and the host qi interact each other over the 6 steps. And that interaction is what determines the severity of the weather changes and the disease outbreaks in the specific 60 days window. The primary comparison, the one that sets the tone for the whole year, is between the Si Tian and the third host step, which is always Minister Fire. Let me show you the metrics. Here is the annual客主加临matrix. We compare each possible Si Tian against the third host step, which is always Minister Fire. And the 5-phase relationship between them tells us the tone of the year. 2 words to know: Shun meaning harmonious or moderate, where the guests generate the host, or they share an element, and the Ni meaning adverse, where the host controls the guest, bringing extreme weather and rapid, severe disease. A wind would Si Tian generate the host fire, Shun, moderate. Those are the Si high years like 2025. An imperial fire Si Tian is the same element as the host fire, same qi, and this produces double fire with heat disease amplified. Those are the Zhǔ years, including our 2026. A damp earth Si Tian gives us adverse, unexpected pattern in the Chou Wei years. Minister Fire Si Tian sit in the same position as the host, harmonious, in the Yin Shen years. A dryness metal, 四天 has a fire controlling metal, adverse with the respiratory condition in the Mao You years. And a cold water, 四天 has water controlling the host fire, Shun moderate with cooler summers in the Cheng Shu years. So far, 2026, the Imperial Fire 四天 meeting the Minister Fire host gives us the same qi. The double fire signature will return into the final chart. Let me distill the metrics into its governing principle because it comes down to two outcomes. One, on the left is Shun, harmonious and moderate. This happens when the guest qi generates host qi, a relationship the classic called Shèng de mutually obtaining, or when the guest and the host simply share the same element. The result is moderate weather changes and the disease outbreaks that stay manageable. The visiting energy support the resident seasonal energy. They get along. On the right is Ni, adverse or extreme. This happens when the host qi controls the guest qi, Buxiang de not mutually obtaining. The result is extreme weather phenomena and the disease that is severe and rapid in onset. The resident energy suppresses the visitor, creating conflict and instability in that period. The Su Wen, chapter 68, puts it plainly. When guest and host do not agree, illness is serious and rapid in onset. So when we build a chart, every step can be tagged Shun or Ni, and the Ni steps are the one to flag in advance as your high risk windows. Section 7 covers one of the most clinically nuanced ideas in the whole system. Sheng Fu, dominating and revenge. It describes the self-correct mechanism of nature. When one element dominates excessively, a compensatory revenge qi rises to restore balance. This is the concept that explains why a patient can improve mid-year, then unexpectedly relapse. Let me unpack the two halves, the dominating qi and the revenge qi. Sheng Fu has two faces, and the slide shows them side by side. On the left is the Sheng Qi, the dominating qi. This appears in a deficient year, a buji year, when the annual period is weak. The element that normally controls in the 5-phase cycle steps in and dominates instead. The important clinical consequence is that the year's climate then reflects the dominating element, not the original Dawen. The Su Wen chapter 69 gives the pattern. If wood is inadequate, dryness, that is metal, prevails everywhere. If a fire is inadequate, cold prevails. If earth is inadequate, wind prevails. On the right is a Fu Qi, the revenge qi. Once the dominating qi has run its course, the sun element of the deficient period rises up and attacks dominator. So when wood is deficient and the metal dominates, fire, the son of the wood, comes flooding in to attack the metal. And here is why this matters at the bedside. Patient may improve in the middle of the year while the dominating phase eases, and then relapse later as the revenge qi arrives unexpectedly. So in deficiency years, prepare your patient for that rebound rather than being caught off guard by it. The next slide tabulates all 5 deficiency years. Here are all 5 deficiency years laid out, so you can read the domination and the revenge sequence at a glance. The pattern is the same each time. The deficient period is overpowered by the element that controls it. And then the son of the deficient period takes revenge. When wood is deficient, metal dominates with the dryness and the harsh winds. Then fire, wood's son, attacks the metal with a sudden heat. Watch for respiratory condition mid-year and a cardiovascular flare later. When fire is deficient, water dominates with excess cold. Then earth attacks water with dampness and flooding. Watch for heart condition. Then digestive damp late. When earth is deficient, wood dominates with the wind and the liver overacting. The metal attacks wood with dryness and the cold. Watch digestive disorders, then a respiratory flare-up. When metal is deficient, fire dominates with excess heat. Then water attacks fire with cold rain. Watch respiratory illness, then kidney and the cold condition. And when water is deficient, earth dominates with the damp and the flooding. Then wood attacks earth with the windstorms. Watch kidney weakness, then a liver chief late in the year. One note for 2026 especially. It's a water excess year, not a deficient year. So this revenge mechanism isn't the main driver. But knowing the table lets you anticipate the rebound in any deficient year you analyze. Section 8 is where it all comes together. The complete 6-chi chart for 2026, being Wu. We know the branch is Wu, which belongs to the Zhǔ pair, so the Tiān is impure fire, and the Quan is a dryness metal. On the next slide, we'll lay the host and guest layer side by side across all 6 steps, and then read off the clinical story. Here is the complete 6-step chart for 2026. Each row is one 60-day segment with its northern and southern dates. The fixed host qi, the year's guest qi, the客主加临result, and the clinical focus. Let me walk it. Step 1. The wind would host meet a cold water guest. Water generate wood, so it's moderate, but expect a cold spring with joint and back pain. Step 2. The imperial fire host meet a wind wood guest. Wood generate fire, moderate again. A warm spring with the liver hot in focus. Step 3 is the big one, the Tiān segment. The minister fire host meet the imperial fire guest. Fire on a fire, same qi, double fire. This is peak heat, the most intense window of the year, with a real hot stress and epidemic risk. In the north, roughly May to July. In the south, November to January. Step 4. The damp earth host meets a damp earth guest. Double damp this time, with excess dampness, digestive trouble, and edema in the late summer. Step 5. The dryness metal host meet minister fire guest qi. Fire controls metal. An adverse step, a dry and hot autumn stressing the lung and skin. And step 6. The Quan segment, the cold water host meet a dryness metal guest. Metal generate water, moderate. A cold, dry winter affecting the lung and kidney. So the shape of the year is clear. Double fire, heat peak mid-year. A damp late summer. And cold, dry close. All under the water controls of fire discord we identified earlier. Let me translate the chart into clinical summary for the year. First, the Tiān is impaired fire, so heat dominates from January to July. Cardiovascular and inflammatory conditions peak in the first half. Protect the heart in and help patients avoid overheating. Second, the standard, the step 3 is the double fire window, the same Qi meeting of Impera and the Minister Fire, roughly May to July. This is the most intense period of the entire year, when the extreme heat diseases are possible. So flag your heart and hypertension patients early and manage them before this window opens. Third, step 4 brings a double dampness in late summer, July to September, excess dampness, driving spleen and digestive disorders, edema, and weight issues. Fourth, the Zhai Quan is a dryness metal, so in the second half, July to January, lung and bowel conditions take over, dry skin and respiratory complaints. And the fifth, threading through the entire year. The Dayun is water excess and the Tiān is fire, so water controls fire all year long. That makes the kidney-heart axis in the single most important clinical focus for 2026. Treat those two together and adjust often because these quarter years shift unpredictably. Let me pull everything together with the key takeaways from today. 1. The 6 Qi come from the 12 earthly branches. 6 atmospheric forces of about 60 days each, and Earth's response to the heavenly period. 2. Every year lays a fixed host Qi and a variable guest Qi, the guest being set by the year's branch. 3. The Tiān rules the first half of the year and the upper body, while the Zhai Quan rules the second half and the lower body. 4.客主加临read the meeting of the guest and the host at each step, taking it shun harmonious or ni adverse. 5. Shèng Fu predicts the mid-year rebound that catches us out in deficiency year. And the 6-hour worked example 2026, Bing Wu has the impaired fire Tiān over dryness metal Zhai Quan, with the double fire heat peak in the middle of the year. As for what's next, Guide 5 takes the Keju Jiā Lín and Yunqi Sheng Shuai across all 60 Jiazhi years, with a complete interaction table. And the 2026 Annual Health Guide for the Bing Wu year gives a full month-by-month calendar with a herbal formula and acupuncture point. If you find this guide useful, please share with your colleagues and students. Thank you for joining me. Take care of yourself in harmony with the Qi of the year. And I'll see you in the next guide.